Good evening. Tonight we turn our attention to Canada, where a new law, the Strategic Resource Sovereignty Act, threatens to upend the economic balance of North America. This legislation allows Canada to nationalize key industries and control exports of critical resources like energy, minerals, and agriculture. The ripple effects won't stop at the border. American states deeply tied to Canada face immediate risk. We're talking about potential supply chain chaos, job losses, and economic instability on a scale we haven't seen in decades. 6 U.S. states stand at the edge of this crisis, from California's tech hubs to New York's financial centers. The question isn't if this will hit us, but how hard. Stay with us as we reveal which states are in the crosshairs and what's at stake. California, the land of sunshine and innovation, a beacon of progress on the West Coast. It's not just a state, it's the world's 5th largest economy, a powerhouse that shapes global markets and trends. Its economic influence is undeniable, a testament to its entrepreneurial spirit and diverse industries. But beneath the surface of prosperity, California is uniquely exposed to a new and emerging threat. Its very strengths could become its weaknesses. Its tech, agriculture, and energy sectors, the pillars of its economic might, are deeply intertwined with Canada, forming a complex web of dependencies that are now at risk. The economic relationship between California and Canada is vital, a crucial artery for trade and resources. The new law, with its potential to disrupt established trade routes, could cut off energy imports, a critical lifeline for California's power grid. This disruption could send prices soaring to unprecedented levels, triggering widespread blackouts and crippling the state's infrastructure. The consequences would be far-reaching, impacting businesses and households alike. California's farms, the breadbasket of the nation, rely heavily on Canadian fertilizers and equipment. These resources are essential for maintaining crop yields and feeding the country. New tariffs or outright bans on these vital imports could devastate crops, leading to shortages and economic hardship for farmers. The impact would ripple through the food supply chain, driving up food prices for consumers across the state and beyond. Tech innovation, the engine of California's economic growth, is also at risk. Cross-border data flows, the lifeblood of the digital economy, and talent exchanges with Canada, a source of skilled workers and innovative ideas, could freeze, stifling creativity and progress. This disruption would stall Silicon Valley's engine, jeopardizing its position as a global leader in technology. Ports like Los Angeles and Long Beach, vital hubs for international trade, would face unprecedented backlogs, crippling the flow of goods and disrupting supply chains. The situation would worsen as trade with Canada grinds to a halt, creating bottlenecks and inefficiencies throughout the system. This disruption would extend beyond California's borders, disrupting global commerce and impacting economies worldwide. State finances, already strained by existing challenges, would crater under the weight of these economic shocks. Tax revenues would collapse as businesses struggle and unemployment rises, leaving the state with a massive budget shortfall. The result? Widespread job losses, a surge in homelessness, and escalating social unrest as communities grapple with the economic fallout. California's progressive strengths, its commitment to green policies, its global reach, its diverse and innovative economy, now expose its greatest vulnerabilities, making it a prime target for economic disruption. The dream of a self-sufficient, innovative state, a beacon of progress for the world, could shatter under the weight of this external shock, leaving a legacy of broken promises and unrealized potential. This is not just an economic threat confined to California, it's a warning sign for the entire global economy. It's a test of California's resilience, its ability to adapt and overcome adversity in the face of unprecedented challenges. The Golden State, once a symbol of prosperity and boundless opportunity, now stands first in line for collapse, a stark reminder of the fragility of even the most powerful economies. The warning is clear. Our interconnected world, for all its benefits, is more fragile than we think, and the consequences of disruption can be devastating. Texas, the heart of American energy, a state synonymous with oil and gas, is next in line to feel the impact of Ottawa's decisions. We're talking about a potential energy shock that could ripple through the entire Texan economy. Its refineries, massive and complex, are specifically built and optimized for processing Canadian heavy crude, a key ingredient in their operations. These aren't just any refineries. They're designed for a particular type of oil. And now, these refineries, and the entire Texan economy, find themselves at the mercy of Ottawa's new law, a law that could significantly disrupt the flow of this crucial resource. If Canada decides to slow down or even completely stop its oil exports to the United States, particularly to Texas, the consequences could be severe. Texas refineries, starved of their primary feedstock, could be forced to shut down operations, leading to a significant decrease in production. This shutdown would not only impact the energy sector, but would also result in costing thousands of jobs across the state and drastically slashing state revenues, impacting essential services and infrastructure projects. The ripple effect wouldn't stop there. It would extend to chemical plants that rely on the refinery byproducts, and then to manufacturers who depend on those chemicals for their own production processes. Even banks, particularly those with deep exposure to the energy sector through loans and investments, would feel the pinch. Texas's booming economic growth, which has been largely funded and fueled by the oil and gas industry, would grind to a halt, stalling projects and impacting future development. The extensive trade relationship with Canada, involving billions of dollars in goods and services, would suddenly face new and potentially insurmountable barriers, disrupting established supply chains. This disruption would squeeze farmers struggling to get their products to market, and manufacturers facing increased costs and reduced access to essential materials. The mere uncertainty surrounding the future of energy supply could be enough to drive investment away from Texas, seeking more stable and predictable environments. A credit crunch, characterized by tighter lending standards and reduced access to capital, could quickly follow. This would occur as banks are forced to absorb significant losses stemming from defaults on energy-related loans. For a state that prides itself on its independence and self-reliance, this newfound vulnerability to external forces represents a profound shock to the very core of the system. The Lone Star identity, built on energy dominance and unparalleled economic might, now unexpectedly hinges on critical decisions being made thousands of miles away in Ottawa. Texas is facing a potential economic crisis that has been, in effect, engineered by one of its closest allies and trading partners. This situation starkly exposes the inherent risks associated with deep economic integration and reliance on interconnected supply chains. The lesson to be learned here is clear. Even the most powerful and seemingly self-sufficient states are not immune to the disruptive forces of global shocks and interconnected economies. The future of Texas and its continued prosperity now precariously depends on forces operating far beyond its own borders and control. New York, the world's financial capital, is on the front lines of this crisis. Canadian banks and pension funds hold trillions in U.S. assets. A forced sell-off could trigger a Wall Street panic. Nationalization of Canadian firms would spook investors, sending stock prices tumbling and wiping out American wealth. Wall Street banks are exposed through loans to Canadian companies. Defaults could spark a credit crisis. Insurance giants would face losses as Canadian bonds lose value. Legal and consulting firms would lose cross-border business, leading to layoffs in high-paying sectors. New York's real estate market, fueled by Canadian investment, could collapse if capital flees. The city's tax base would erode, threatening essential services. The law undermines trust and predictability, core pillars of financial markets. New York's status as a global capital is at risk. This is a crisis of confidence, with consequences that could reverberate worldwide. Wall Street's fate is now tied to political decisions far beyond its control. Michigan's auto industry, a cornerstone of the state's economy, is intricately built on seamless trade with Canada. This partnership has fostered innovation, created jobs, and driven economic growth for decades. The Ambassador Bridge, a vital link connecting Detroit and Windsor, serves as the very artery of North American manufacturing. It's a critical trade route, facilitating the movement of goods and materials essential for countless industries. This crucial artery is now threatened by the specter of new tariffs, which could disrupt established trade flows and raise costs for businesses on both sides of the border. Further exacerbating the situation are potential delays at border crossings, and the looming possibility of nationalization of key industries, creating an environment of uncertainty and risk. If Canada were to seize or restrict access to key suppliers of essential components, the consequences for Michigan's auto industry would be dire. Michigan's assembly lines, the heart of its manufacturing sector, could grind to a complete halt, impacting production and employment across the state. The costs of essential materials like steel and aluminum would inevitably soar, placing immense pressure on manufacturers and consumers alike. This would make American cars significantly less competitive in the global market, potentially leading to a decline in sales and market share. The ripple effect could trigger widespread layoffs across the automotive sector, impacting families and communities throughout Michigan. Thousands of small suppliers, the backbone of the automotive supply chain, would face immense financial strain. These businesses are deeply integrated with Canada, relying on cross-border trade for their survival and prosperity. Many would face the grim prospect of bankruptcy, further destabilizing the state's economy. The human cost of such a scenario would be devastating. With 1 in 5 Michigan jobs directly or indirectly linked to the auto industry, a significant portion of the state's workforce would be at risk. Communities across Michigan could be hollowed out, as families struggle with job losses and economic hardship. This could trigger a social crisis reminiscent of the devastating economic downturn of 2008. A period of immense hardship for the state. The tourism and retail sectors, vital components of Michigan's economy, would also suffer significant setbacks. These industries are heavily fueled by cross-border travel and commerce, which would be severely curtailed as tensions rise. Tourist attractions would stand empty, and retail stores would be forced to close their doors, further impacting the state's economy. Even critical infrastructure projects like the Gordie Howe Bridge, designed to improve trade and transportation, could face significant delays. These delays would worsen existing bottlenecks at the border, further hindering trade and economic activity. This is not merely an abstract threat or a hypothetical scenario, it's a very real and present danger to Michigan's future. It represents a direct assault on Michigan's identity as a manufacturing powerhouse and a hub of innovation. It threatens the very economic engine that has driven the state's prosperity for generations. The Strategic Resource Sovereignty Act, with its potential to disrupt established trade relationships, could effectively break the intricate supply chain that defines the entire Midwest region, not just Michigan. For a state that is still diligently recovering from the economic blows of the past, this could prove to be a devastating setback. This could be the knockout punch that derails Michigan's progress and sends it spiraling back into economic hardship. Michigan's future, its prosperity, and the well-being of its citizens hangs precariously in the balance. The stakes have simply never been higher, demanding immediate attention and decisive action to protect Michigan's interests. Illinois, anchored by Chicago, is the crossroads of American trade. Its manufacturing and agriculture depend on Canadian resources and markets. The new law could drive up costs for machinery, food, and chemicals, while shrinking export markets. Chicago's rail network, the continent's busiest, would face gridlock as trade stalls. Farmers would lose access to Canadian fertilizers and buyers, threatening rural economies. Illinois' fragile finances, already burdened by debt, would collapse as tax revenues plunge. Widespread layoffs in manufacturing would trigger a spiral of decline, hitting cities from Rockford to Peoria. Energy flows from Canada would be disrupted, raising prices for consumers and businesses. The convergence of these threats could paralyze the state. Illinois' role as a continental hub now exposes it to unprecedented risk. The land of Lincoln faces an economic fracture that could divide communities and cripple its future. The state's prosperity, once taken for granted, is now in jeopardy. The warning signs are impossible to ignore. Florida's vulnerability is hidden, but real. The state's economy relies on Canadian snowbirds, hundreds of thousands who spend billions each winter. Economic turmoil in Canada would dry up this cash flow, hitting tourism and real estate hard. Canadians are the top foreign buyers of Florida homes. A sell-off would crash property values and stifle spending. Florida's farmers depend on Canadian markets for winter produce, and on Canadian imports in the off-season. New tariffs or disruptions would leave crops rotting and store shelves empty. Ports and financial services tied to Canadian trade and capital would suffer. The social bond between Florida and Canada would fray, souring a long-standing relationship. The crisis would arrive quietly, empty hotels for sale signs and struggling farmers. Florida's paradise is more dependent on Canada than most realize. The new law threatens to bring a chilling economic winter to the Sunshine State. Recovery could take years. 6 powerhouse states, California, Texas, New York, Michigan, Illinois, and Florida, now face a crisis of historic proportions. The Strategic Resource Sovereignty Act is law, and its impact could hit at any moment. Our prosperity and security are at risk, and we are dangerously unprepared. The coming weeks will be critical as leaders scramble to respond. Will we act in time or be caught flat-footed? Stay informed. Subscribe for updates as this story unfolds. The future of these states and the nation hangs in the balance.